Hey, good evening, everyone. This is Thad Porter, and I just want to provide some commentary from the MPS Solutions Forum that I was able to host this past Thursday evening. I sat down with three prospective candidates and two existing Board of Education candidates, and I attempted to engage them all in a conversation about what to do with the current situation we find ourselves in the Montgomery Public School system. Along with those candidates and board members, I also had the opportunity to speak with an individual who's an advocate for the charter school system. He's actually on the board of Lead Academy, which is the charter school that's going to be implemented in the system. It was verified and certified actually through the interim superintendent of schools, Ed Richardson. A lot of information about charter schools. Some of the information was accurate, some of it was not, but it was an excellent discussion. And then lastly, Representative John Knight came in and he made some very brief comments about the funding issues that are facing the system as well as the state in terms of how we fund education. But I just want to give you something of a, for those of you who express some interest in actually coming to the forum, but you didn't come for whatever reason, but you've been keeping in touch by viewing some of the videos and reading some of the comments. I just wanted to share some insight with you. So for those individuals who came or who were present on the panel on last night, we had Dr. Marcus Vandiver, who's a candidate for District 1, Dr. Lisa Keith, the current representative for Board of Education District 1, Phil Ensler, candidate for District 3, Brenda DeRamus Coleman, also a candidate for District 3, Timothy Bass, candidate for District 6, and the president of our current Board of Education, Robert Porterfield, who is the current District 6 representative. And then, of course, there's William Green. He's a city councilman for District 5, but he's on the board for Lead Academy. So he came to talk about charter schools and what Lead Academy hopes to do in the Montgomery Public School system. And then, of course, Representative John Knight. He had another event that he had to attend, so he came in, made some very brief comments, and then actually had to leave. And I want to go ahead and put this out there for people who may have thought something was nefarious about William Green and Representative Knight leaving prior to the event completing. The forum was supposed to be held on last Thursday night. And so it's a week later, and we just postponed the forum due to inclement weather. Some significant storms were coming through the system, and we did not want to impact the ability for people to get out or for their desire to even come out and hear from these particular individuals on our forum. So we postponed it an additional week. So the weather had passed, was a beautiful day, but they had some existing engagements that they had to get to. So I appreciate Mr. Green staying as long as he did. Representative Knight did come back and make some comments. But I want to say something about the events of the evening. I made some notes in reference to some of the comments that were made. First and foremost, Mr. Ensler made some reference to inequities in the system. He talked about being able to listen to the teachers, being able to listen to the students, and giving the individuals who were in charge of making decisions some more information to know that they are impacting people's lives and how they're impacting people's lives. I thought that was interesting. Dr. Vandiver talked about discipline and how that is such a significant interference in the classroom for the teachers. That was actually echoed by the candidate for District 6, Timothy Bass. He actually shared with the audience an incident that occurred with his own child, how he had to find out from the hospital that his child had been admitted, as opposed to hearing from someone at the school where the event occurred. I thought that was a very powerful story, a testament of what's going on with discipline. And it's not the first time that has occurred in the system. Having been a former Montgomery Public Schools educator, I'm aware of some incidents that either were not reported or they were just incidents that were not dealt with in a way that we would have our own children's situations handled. You know, we would always want to put the children that we have in our trust. I like to think of them in the same light as my own personal children, so that if something were to happen with them, I want to be able to address their concerns the way I would as a parent want someone to address my concerns. So that was a very significant piece, the piece on discipline. The one thing that there were some negatives, of course. You can't get away from those negatives, but I think that's important to address the negatives. Even though, in my best efforts, I was trying to steer our conversation towards solutions, things that we can do moving forward, I found it very strange that the board president, Robert Porterfield, continued to go on about the phenomenal things that he was doing in District 6. And it seems as though every opportunity he had, he was trumpeting the phenomenal work that was going on in District 6, and that regardless of what else was being said or who was saying it, that District 6 was doing some phenomenal things. And he continued to say that he was always going to stand up for education in Montgomery. In other words, he wanted us to sort of be like the Wizard of Oz and, ignore that man behind the curtain, so to speak. Don't pay attention to this intervention that's going on within our system, the only intervention in the entire state. Pay no attention to that. I thought that was very telling. So I took some time to actually look at District 6 because I was curious. I said, well, what's happening in District 6? The reason that this was such a significant part of the discussion is because there was some heated, some very passionate conversations that went on. We had in our audience Miss Vicki Holloway from Central Office, and she deals with data. And I asked a question that detailed the fact that when Ed Richardson was delivering his report, he mentioned that the average ACT score was 14. Immediately, Ms. Holloway spoke up. I asked her to, for the sake of those people in the audience who did not know who she was, so she would introduce herself and then make her comment. So she was very kind, and she turned and introduced who she was. Then she began to make her comments. And her comments were that the state was inflating that number, or I guess deflating it, if you will, to bring emphasis to it, because she said they pulled out the magnet scores. Because if you include the magnet scores, the number would be 18. And so the average ACT score for the system would be 18. Now, there's one or two ways you can look at that. So let's talk about the one way you can look at that 18. First and foremost, if you had to add the magnet ACT in order to elevate a 14 to an 18 for the system, that is a problem in itself. That's a problem in itself, because if we take all the traditional schools in the system and the average ACT score is a 14, that's a problem, because it's not two different systems. It is one Montgomery Public School system. And then I went on to think about another thing that was bothersome to me. Let's say that's wrong. Let's say the state was wrong. They shouldn't have put that information out there that the average was a 14 without including the magnet schools. Well, this was my issue. Even if that's correct, they shouldn't have done that, and it's an 18. Where can you go in the state of Alabama with an ACT of 18? So I looked it up. The University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa, you must have a 22 ACT in order to be considered for admittance. Now, they'll take you with something less than a 22, but then you will probably be relegated to taking 099 or remedial work while you're in college. And any of you who know anything about college, it's about $300 a credit hour. So it's 3 hours for a class. It's about $1,000 for one class. So you mean to tell me that you'll be willing to go to college and pay $1,000, $2,000, or $3,000 for remedial courses that do not offer you a collegiate credit? That is a travesty. Whether it's a 14 or 18, that's a travesty. And I think that we should acknowledge it for what it is and stop trying to make excuses. Then I looked at the University of Auburn. Auburn's will accept you. The minimum score is a 24. Same things apply. You can come in with less than a 24 because you're a phenomenal athlete or some other benefit that you have to the institution, but you'll still be relegated to taking 099 over remedial coursework, paying $2,000 or $3,000 a semester for something that will not give you one college credit because you're not prepared for that collegiate level work. Then I went on to look at some of the local schools. AUM, Auburn University here in Montgomery, will accept you with an 18 because they have an 18. I think it's a 2.3 GPA. They're trying to encourage enrollment. It is for the public to encourage more people to come to school. I think that's a phenomenal effort. But what they are, you may not know, is that with that 18, yes, you're in college, but you're still taking remedial coursework. They'll prepare you for the collegiate level classes, but you're going to come in and you're not going to take college credit until you pass those 099 classes. Now, that's not that they're being disingenuous or something nefarious is going on and they're trying to trick you. They're just trying to open up the doors to get more students to come in. But I need you to understand that whether it's a 14 or 18, it still is not preparing our students for a career in college studies. And then there was Alabama State University, and Alabama State is looking for 23. Same thing applies. They'll accept you something less than that because you have some other skills. But the bottom line is, in the event that you get into their institution and you have an 18 or 14 ACT, you're going to take 099 coursework. And in the event that you can't complete that 099 coursework, then you're going to be summarily dismissed because you could not begin your collegiate level work. They do not want to damage the overall institution's statistical data of their average ACT score. So you'll be released as a student or be put on suspension or probation until you can elevate that score. The challenge is, what are we doing at the high school level? So then I wanted to go deeper because I know that everybody was in an uproar about the ACT, and all I could think of was, so the 18 is great? Is that what we're saying? The average 18? Even though I know that the majority of those students at the magnet school, they are making that minimum level for those institutions. And so to bring in the traditional high school's ACT scores, yes, that is important. You should have all the scores and you should provide the data. But I think with the forum being about solutions, the first thing we should have thought is, yeah, that's not right, but our students aren't going to be prepared for college. So what do we need to do to get them to prepare for college? That was not the conversation. What we need to do to prepare them for college, what we need to prepare them towards whatever it is they want to do after they leave high school. The conversation was the data wasn't wrong, they're picking on us, woe is me. Now, there is a room full of career educators, and I understand that when the system was taken over and we were under state intervention, that we began to react, or those people in higher ed or those people in positions in the central office began to react just like a cornered animal, in that they were going to fight back no matter how this argument that they had lacked any foundation that could help the students. It was all about the adults and our professional, how people see us, our careers. And all I could think of is, listen, just take some accountability. Say, yeah, you know what? We haven't been doing a good job. This is an eye-opening experience. We're going to submit ourselves to this process because we know that it is in the best interest of our students. That was not the spirit in the room. What was very intriguing to me was the stark contrast between Mr. Porterfield's comments and those of all the potential candidates. Mr. Bass, Dr. Vandiver, Mr. Ensler. Everybody else is talking about the students and how we can move things towards being a student-centered and teacher-centered, so we can get back to instruction in the classroom that won't produce a diploma mill, if you will, but will produce students that are actually college and career ready. As opposed to trumpeting that we're doing all these phenomenal things. So I looked at the schools in Mr. Porterfield's system. He has Floyd Middle Magnet. He has Jeff Davis High School. He has Crump Elementary, Carver Elementary, Carver High, Davis Elementary, Johnson Elementary, Macmillan International, McKee Middle, Floyd Elementary, Bear Exploration. Now, I went ahead and did the math and just took out the magnet schools because I think it was important to say, okay, yeah, listen, we've already come to some conclusions that the magnet schools are doing what they need to do. The challenge is with our traditional schools and how it's impacting the system as a whole. So what can we do within the traditional schools? So I take out Bear Exploration because that's a magnet school. I looked at Floyd Elementary. I take it out of the equation because Floyd was one of the schools proposed for being closed. Then we have McKee Middle, which according to the state intervention, or the state report card rather, that's a D. Macmillan International, we had to take it out of the equation because it's a magnet school. Then you have Johnson Elementary, according to the state report card, an F. Davis Elementary, also an F. Carver High, also an F. Then we move to Carver Elementary, according to the state report card, a C. Crump Elementary, according to the state report card, a C. And then Jeff Davis High School, failing. Floyd Middle Magnet, another magnet school we pull out of the equation. So I began to think to myself, are we fooling ourselves when we think that the current board, with the way that it is constituted, is actually going to make a good faith adjustment with what they're doing? Because if this that I just covered with you is supposed to be some significant progress that we need to be trumpeting throughout our state, then we're never going to get where we need to be. So it's so imperative for those of you who are registered voters to come out and let the current board members know that the status quo is never going to be good enough for our students. It impacts us. If not today, years from now. We cannot allow people to begin to look and view our system with low education and the desire to maintain the status quo just because we want to keep control, just because we don't want people to see us in a negative light. You know, when my students in my class don't do well on a test, I take that personal. I think all teachers take that personal. It's my instruction that prepared them for this test. So if they didn't do well, I have to look at myself. Maybe a handful didn't do well, but if the majority of the students failed a test, failed an assignment, I need to take a critical look at my instruction. What did I do or not do? How can I get better? What steps do I need to take to help my students grasp this information? If that's not my thrust, if I'm constantly saying it's somebody else's fault, or that 2 or 3 kids that did exceptionally well, see, those students, they know what to do. That should not be our approach to education. It's called public school for a reason, because we educate those who are in the public. We educate the masses. I was disappointed with the lack of understanding with some of our board members. I'm not an advocate of charter schools. I never have been. But at this point in the game, I needed to understand charter schools. So I did my due diligence and I studied some information about charter schools. And I was disappointed to hear Mr. Porterfield, once again, I guess sounds like a commentary about how poorly it is, but in the old proverb that the fish rots from the head is a glaring proverb at this point, because I think about that individual, Mr. Porterfield, being the president of the board, and his comment was that charter schools are private institutions, that they can pick and choose who they want. And that is simply not the case. Charter schools are public. Anybody can go there. If it's an overwhelming number and it's beyond what they can hold, then they're required to go to a lottery system. And people can say, yeah, I know about the lottery system, it's political. Well, there are several things that were brought out. We talked about embracing nepotism. That was such a huge argument about people who are related to our current power structure in the system, and how they are continuously getting either promoted, getting positions or opportunities over people who might be more qualified. Now, I didn't delve into those questions because we weren't there to talk about what we already consider problems or issues. What we were there to do was delve into solutions. So let me give you a few things that we discussed that were considered solutions. We talked about dealing with our current system with a student first, teacher first strategy. We talked about extending our professional learning communities so that we would have the opportunity to learn from other systems that were doing things the right way, and we could go into those buildings and then have individuals come back and sort of help us navigate through our challenge. They also talked about listening parties, to which I said that I would actually volunteer to host listening parties for all of the board members in their individual districts so that they wouldn't have to have all these parents stop coming to board meetings. We had several in the audience who made mention that they refused to go to board meetings because they only had like 2 minutes to speak. And they were just overwhelmed with the forum because they could speak their minds and ask questions and dialogue with the candidates. And I thought, if maybe once a quarter the candidates would provide listening parties for their district where they just would show up in the communities that they serve for their constituency, and they would sit down with maybe one or two other or three volunteers, and they would just listen to the people in the audience, periodically maybe even respond to a question or so. But a listening party so they could actually know what's going on in their district. I feel like that is a great move, and that would help us to bring back the public trust, because you can't ask the public to increase finance, have them vote for something where their taxes are going to be elevated without showing them what we're doing to be more responsive to their needs. Now, the last thing I want to say is I have a handful of flyers from some people that were there. This was one I had from Mr. Ramos. She is a candidate for District 3. Along with hers is Mr. Ensler, who is also a candidate for District 3. I found that his inclusion of students in everything that he does, just a phenomenal effort. And then lastly, I had this gentleman. He came to be a part of the conversation. Those of you who may not know who he is, he's running for the seat, the 78th House District. And he made a very stunning parallel to what's happening in our system. He talked about this. He brought me back to my instruction of poetry. Robert Frost's poem, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. The line goes, "The woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. And miles to go before I sleep." The phrase is used in almost every walk of life, including literature, business, politics, everyday life. For instance, an old man can say to his children, to show that he has much more to do for them before he dies. A businessman can allude to business and his workers that he has to do so much to give them some bonus. Military strategists could even allude to this to his troops to urge them to complete the mission before they go to sleep. And then I thought about our education system and how appropriate that quote was. Based on what I saw at our forum this past Thursday night, we got a lot of work to do. We got a lot of work to do. I think the first thing we need to do is look at our current board members and see their response. Dr. Lisa Keith was there as well, and she admitted that we needed some new blood. She says even if it meant that she didn't lose, she felt better about not being on the board, having met the candidates that were on the forum Thursday night. She all but resigned based on how knowledgeable they were, their level of energy, their youth, and their experience, and what she believed they would bring to the board. Because she said she was consistently, in a 6-1 vote, she would always be the one dissenting vote. 6-1, consistently, she would be the one dissenting vote. And I thought to myself, in our system, as tragic as things have been handled, and nobody thinks that we should be moving in a different direction, with the exception of perhaps one member, and that member says that we need new leadership, and she'd be willing to give up her seat in order for that to happen. You know, of those individuals that are up for re-election, because I know that there are 2 that are not, I would encourage you to consider starting over with our board and moving in a different direction, because the fish does rot from the head. And we need something in Montgomery. We need solutions. We need new ideas. And at our board, nobody was talking about being accountable and being transparent, with the exception of our prospective candidates. And so that's what I put before you today. I hope that you found this interesting enough for you to get involved and do your due diligence with each candidate. And I encourage you to go to the polls and vote and provide some opportunities for our young people and our teachers in the Montgomery Public School system.